hello from wherever you are and whatever time zone you're in. It's morning here for me in California. So if you're West Coast of the United States, good morning. So you're here for a PIF talk, and our basic ask is that you pay it forward in any way that you choose. However, I do have a suggestion, which is kind of neat because you can have a friend join you. That would be the PIF or the pay it forward is to have a friend join you and introduce them to Life Coach University. So I'm Lani Kim, and I really want you to know about the Life Coach Conference. It's coming up on February, which is Tuesday, February 15th at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's going to be on get the secrets on how to reach your goals. Who doesn't want to do that, right? How to reach your goals. And our host or the host and keynote speaker is going to be Anna Wallner. And here's a special treat. Anna Wallner is Swedish, and she usually conducts everything in Swedish. So whether it's a podcast you listen to or her coaching, but without reading subtitles, you get to listen to her in English. And that is a special treat for us. So she'll be the host and keynote speaker. And on the panel is going to be none other than some of our other coaches, Kelly Turner, Chris Wales, Tanya Hunt, and Norma Fraun. And I'm so excited for you to be part of this conference. I'll be there, and I'm Lani Kim, and I'm a life coach. So a little bit about me. I am a life coach, and I run the Thriving Life. And I run the Courageous Fear program, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end. But welcome. I'm an educator with a background in K through 12. I've done some adult teaching, and I'm a homeschooling mom. So I've dabbled in education in a lot of different areas. And I also coach in a lot of different areas. And today, one of the tools that I use with my clients and that I love educating people with is shifting gears, unintentional to intentional thoughts. So here are kind of the highlights of what we're going to go over in the next hour. So you're going to go over 4 steps, or we're going to go over 4 steps. The first one is identify the thought with the 3 whys game. Whys, WHYS. Tap into your own body. So listen to the story your body is telling you. 3, define and create safety. And the 4th one is choose your slogan. So a couple of questions I think most people have when you learn anything new is why, what, and who. If you remember kind of the W's of writing papers, right? The basics that we learn. So why use this process? Why use this process? You feel stuck. You feel overwhelmed. You have a decision to make, or you can't make a decision, or you keep repeating your mistakes. or what you would label as mistakes. That's the narrative you tell yourself in your head. Why do I keep doing this? What is the result? Like if you use this process, what can you expect at the end of it? So here's a couple of things. Self-awareness, empowerment, a sense of responsibility, empathy for not only others, but yourself, and alternative options for your brain. And I'm going to go more into that as we go through the next hour. Who is this for? Well, anyone, everyone. But I'm going to kind of expand upon like really what does that look like in someone else's life or your life. So a doctor, right? Maybe you have a high patient load, you're working a lot of hours, the stress is getting to you, maybe your personal relationships are suffering. So how do you shift gears, right? You have the narrative that you've been telling yourself. How now do you create a new narrative for yourself? Maybe you're a teacher. The past 2 school years have been wild with all the accommodations you've had to make, the new things you've had to learn. And for whatever country you're in, maybe protocols keep changing and it's really starting to affect the way that you feel day to day. Or maybe it's even as simple as you have a student that annoys you and takes over your class and you feel like he ruins or she ruins your day. So again, how do you reframe the narrative in your head so that this is not something you're buying into? Maybe you're a mom, right? You're juggling, you're balancing, you're trying to be the Pinterest mom or the Facebook mom, or not Pinterest, but Instagram mom, and you just lose your cool. And at the end of the day, you're speaking to your family in a very condescending manner. Maybe you're the CEO who no one has the guts to tell you certain unpleasant things about yourself and your relationships suffer, right? So, how do you now change that narrative? Maybe you're the cashier. You need more money because raising kids is expensive and you just don't understand how to change that narrative in your head. So this is for any of those people. And even if you're not one of those people, you can still use this process or this tool. So we're going to go over the steps, the 4 steps. So the first one is identify the specific thought with the 3 Whys game. So WHY. This really tool is going to help you untangle your thoughts and start to take away the overwhelm, start to take away the resistance that you feel towards changing your narrative, right? You probably have a narrative in your head. And part of your brain is telling you it is true. It is completely true. And it is telling you the story of why it's true. But then there's another part of your brain, and that is why you're here, telling you, okay, but there's something about this that we feel that we want to change. This is not the reality we want to keep living day to day. And that is what we're going to speak to. The brain that's telling you, right, despite the resistance that you might feel, despite how true your other part of your brain is telling you the story is, how true it is, you know you don't like the narrative and you're here to change it. So the three whys game is basically untangling these by asking yourself the simple question of why at least 3 times. I would say 3 to 5 times, but um, at least 3 times, right? So, and why is this? Why? Why is this? Could be when you make changes in your life, you have your primitive primal brain that immediately is going to shout, no, no, we are not doing this for a variety of reasons. It might be due to energy output, it's fear of the unknown, um, and um, and those grooves in your brain are so deeply rooted and so strong that it's really hard to step out of that. So you start off with your defense, right? Because with a lot of becauses. So you have this narrative in your head, and it's as you're starting to listen to this, you're telling your becauses. Oh, well, I have this narrative because, and because, and because, and you are starting to weave your magical tale of why you have this narrative in your head. Why do you do the things you do? Why do you say the things you say? Why do you feel the things you do? Why do your interactions with other people go the way they go? Right? So your primitive brain is really trying to make a case for itself right now, and it's going to resist um, and give you a lot of becauses. Now we need to work through that. So what I want to say is at the end of this, though, what you want is a concluding sentence. The shorter, the better. Okay. Like shoot for 3 to 5 words ultimately, but if this is your first time doing it or your first couple times around, you may end up with like a couple sentences, right? But basically you're taking your tale from your primitive brain that as you try to work through all of this, it's going to add more becauses, and this it's going to try to make your story in the tale and the narrative super duper long, right? And all the reasons why. Okay. But this game is to number one, stop that part of your brain. Number two, focus it. And number three, pull apart the story so that you can give the concluding sentence. I think of like Aesop's fables. If you guys have read those, at the very end, they kind of give you this very brief summary of the whole Aesop fable. And that's really what you're trying to do when you ask yourself the why. So, why do I dread waking up to start the day? And answer that. Oh, because I'm tired. Why? Well, because I stayed up late. Why? Because I was watching Netflix until 2 in the morning. Why? Because the day felt heavy and I needed something lighter. So as you play this wise game, you're going to get deeper and deeper. And your story, the long story you have, is going to get more succinct, and you will start to find your concluding sentence. So number one, identify the specific thought using the three whys game. Number two, listen to the story your body is telling you. Okay. So memories are stored within your body in many different ways. And really, the narrative you've told yourself is a compilation, or maybe even it's just one, but usually it's a compilation. That's why it's a habit that you have of um, memories that you have that are stored within your body. And I think of it very much like, how do we send files to each other, right? There's audio, there's video, there's written communication, right? We have all these ways to send information in files. So your memories can be stored in many, many different ways. And that's why even, I had this incident the other day where I ate a, a food that I had before, but it was from a new place. And as soon as I ate it, I had this just reaction on my body of nostalgia and just really lighthearted joy. And it tasted slightly different than the way I'm used to it being prepared. And I know I've had that specific taste before, but in terms of articulating like a time or my setting or even who was there, I have no idea. It was by taste. That is how I stored the memory, by taste. In my body, it was stored as taste. And this is often why when we think back to our childhood, even though we may have gone through something traumatic super, super early in our lives, there's not usually a way for us to articulate with words. It's because it's stored in our body in many different ways, that memory. So a lot of children are not going to be able to articulate a memory before 5 with words because it's just stored completely differently. But they're all aspects of the same information, right? These are all valid pieces of information. So listen to the story your body is telling you. And it's especially a difficult process in the modern world because we really have abdicated these functions to media, right? And so think of even like keeping track of time, right? Before we were outside more often, number one. Number two, we could tell time kind of by looking outside. We could tell seasons. There was all these key factors that we use in our environment to tell us, and our rhythms were usually a lot more regular, right? Because when the lights go out, your body starts to settle into its circadian rhythm, right? Now we have artificial lights. We can stay up as long as we want, right? We can mess with that natural rhythm and we don't pay attention to it like we used to. So think of an Apple Watch, right? And I'm not saying don't use these tools, but just be aware of where you might be losing something to these tools, right? Your Apple Watch will tell you it's got all the timers. I use my timers. I don't have Apple Watch, but I have an iPhone, right? And again, I'm not saying anything's wrong with it, but we kind of start to lose the self-awareness and the consciousness of what our body is telling us. And so like even Zoom, right? It kind of has redefined what it's like to have a conversation, not on the phone, with somebody. And so we need to listen to the story our body is telling us. And that is, for me, that was a huge, at some times it felt like a roadblock because I really couldn't do it. But it also gave me a lot of freedom after I was able to tap into that. Because I could now trust my body to help me figure things out rather than Googling, YouTubing, watching TikToks. I could trust my body to tell me the story. I wasn't trying to concoct it compared to someone else's social media, someone else's YouTube, right? I was settling back inside of my body. So listen to the story your body is trying to tell you. Um, and then you don't even need to label your experience with like emotional titles. So very often, and it's not an invalid question. It's just, this is just more like the asterisk I'm putting towards this question, is how, what the story your body is telling you and how it feels. A lot of times we think we have to come up with like love, joy, like these words, right? These emotional labels or titles. But if you're so disconnected to what that really feels, it's kind of hard to do it. And you start to artificially fill in what you think you should be feeling, the emotion you think you should be feeling, which is not going to help you. You need to actually get into your body and know what you're feeling. So you can root them in past experiences, right? So for me, the story I was telling you about the food really has settled into my body as that time I ate at the noodle restaurant. I I mean, I can articulate it now that it was just like this lighthearted, fun joy. But if I couldn't use specific emotions, the way I initially had described it to myself was, oh, that time I ate at that noodle shop. And all of that experience comes back to me, or what I remember of it comes back to me. I didn't need to put the specific emotional titles. Those actually came as I was telling the story more and more to people. And I was like, oh, okay. As I'm articulating it, I can actually put titles to the emotions I was feeling at that time. Initially, it was just like, oh, it was nostalgic and a taste, right? So again, you can describe your the way your body can describe it to you is in many, many different ways. So I had a client, and she had basically gone through this process, and she had made a lot of new decisions, unexpected decisions, and she was enjoying the results, but so much in a short period of time and being unexpected gave her this sense of spinning. And it started to create a little bit of fear in her, and she started to question her decisions. And so we worked through that sense of spinning, and I asked her to articulate what it might be related to. Um, and so the way she was able to articulate it was like the teacup ride, or like, any of those like rides where you sit in it and you spin yourself dizzy. um, or me, I don't like to actually spin it dizzy myself dizzy. I just like to sit there. But that's the experience she was having. So my question to her was, do you like the spinning or do you not like the spinning? And she says, no, the teacup rides are fun for me. Me personally, no, but that was her experience. And so it wasn't so much that it was a bad spinning. It was actually a fun spinning, but she also needed to reground herself, um, because too much spinning causes you to feel dizzy, whether you like that feeling or not, right? Off balance. So she was feeling off balance in that sense of spinning. So she needed to ground herself. Um, and so that was what her body was telling her. It's a teacup experience, right? But when she tried to put a label on it of spinning, the way her brain took in the spinning was, this is a bad thing. So when we coached through it, we were able to identify that she's super adventurous, and she just loves to like do crazy hikes and last minute adventures. And so for her, that teacup experience was not a negative thing. It was it was fun to her. So again, just be careful of the labels that you put, right? If you artificially start to put them on yourself, or you start to judge the label as good or bad, just let your body experience it. We're not trying to judge the narrative right now. We're just trying to listen to the narrative. And well, you shouldn't judge your narrative ever. You should just listen to your narrative, not saying if it's good or bad. It's just, what do you want to do moving forward with that narrative? And so this process, so going back to listen to what your body is telling you, this process is going to help you also differentiate your circumstance from your story and your thoughts. The reason this is important is because you need to know what is factual about your experience. And then you also need to differentiate what part is the story, the narrative that you're telling yourself. Because that part is what you can control. That is the part you're responsible for. And the other helpful thing to do this is try to expand yourself a little bit, open up yourself, like, even if it takes like physically opening up your chest and breathing in, is to think what else could be true about the situation. And again, this is not taking away from your narrative. This is just what else can be true, right? So I used to be a classroom teacher, and I think of the times where I was maybe, even in the classroom, but I more think of it like when I was monitoring my students and they were running around the playground, and I hear someone crying, right? Students come up to me, and then I say, okay, guys, tell me what happened, right? And they're all shouting these different things, and they all have a different perspective. And again, it's not to say any of them are wrong. It's just they each have a different way that they saw the narrative that they're telling themselves. So this is what is going to help loosen up your mind, right? You're one of the kids telling the story on the playground, but what might some other children say to you? Or what might be the perspective of some other kids on the playground, right? So this is just going to start to loosen up your mind and let your brain accept the fact that there's multiple points of view, right? And then the other important thing is, when these come to mind, don't judge them, right? Whether you actually agree with that viewpoint or not, it's to just write down all the possibilities, right? Because the greatest shifts are going to happen when you can actually listen to things that you don't agree with and just entertain the idea of, how can this be true? Because you really start to expand your experience, and you become such a better learner, and you become more teachable or coachable is what I would say. And that's really how you start to multiply your results. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is define and create safety. So to fully understand your like visceral experience, right, which to your brain means danger, right, you have to feel safe. The reason that we, a term that is often used, right, is buffering. Why do you do things to take your mind off of what is unpleasant? Is because it doesn't feel safe. So to even dive into this deeper, you've got to understand what that is for you. So number one, to me, the most important part of this defining and creating safety is to validate your story. It is not one story, meaning what you're going to work with is not going to be just one story. You've been telling yourself one story, and there's nothing wrong with that story. So I want you to validate the narrative by which you have been running through your mind or living out. It's still a valid story. So don't judge the fact that you thought certain things or your actions were certain things. Your story is still valid. But we want to now create a new gear. So this is what I mean. And this is what I mean by shifting gears is, when you think of a car, it's got different gears. And the individual gears are all different, but they all work together to run the car. And your narrative that you've been living with is just one of those gears, right? So we're going to create additional gears with intentional thoughts. And now you have different places to shift, right? Whereas if you only give yourself one gear, you're going to continue driving in that gear. So you need to create new gears. So not number one, but part of this define and create safety is to visit your safety zone. Okay, start from what you know. So what is your safety zone? What does safety feel like to you? Bring it back to a memory. Or, a memory or a habit that you have that makes you feel safe. What is that experience? That is your safety zone. So I had a client and I was asking her about this the other day, and we were going through processing emotions. And so safety is a huge thing when truly processing emotions, deep, deep emotions. And I said, what's the time that you felt safe? And so for her, it's the times in her life that she remembers having like a really scary dream and running into her parents' bedroom, and just the immediate sense of safety she felt. Like no questions asked, just she dove headlong between them, cuddled up, and went to sleep. That's her sense of safety, right? And so we went on to describe it, right? And you can do that too, but know what it is, right? And take yourself there. Take yourself to your safety zone. And describing it is going to allow you to define it. What are the hallmarks of it? So you can actually take yourself there, right? And then start practicing creating it for yourself. Intentionally take yourself to your zone of safety. You've defined it, right? You know the hallmarks of it. Now you get to go and create it for yourself. And creating safety just allows our brain to unload everything that it's carrying around, or our body to unload and let out what is truly there. And then the fourth part of this is you create your intentional thought. Um, and so, well, let me back up a little bit. Define and create safety, because I was talking about the gears. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. When we are driving, right, we get to choose our gears. We get to choose the gear that suits us at that moment. And they're all necessary gears, right? Now, what we want to do is, number one, make sure we have the gears that are accommodating what we want to do, right? So what if your car didn't have reverse? It could still run. You just would have to go in a circle to revisit wherever you were. You wouldn't ever be able to reverse, or it would greatly limit where you can drive, right? But say you want to be able to drive to other places, you want to visit other places, you want to maybe make the driving experience more efficient, well, you're going to need a reverse gear. So that's what this process is creating, right? Maybe you feel like you can only drive forward, you don't have the reverse. So again, each gear is valid. The narrative you have is just a gear that you've been driving around in, and it's perfectly valid. You can choose to stay in that gear, but if you're here, you probably don't want to. So that is where we're creating this intention for intentional thoughts. And I also want you to see that your gear that you're in right now is a valid gear, meaning it's gotten you to where you are now. That alone validates it. That alone validates it. If you think you could do better, if you want a different experience, that's a complete choice. But it doesn't take away from the gear that you've been driving in, right? You don't. So for instance, first gear and fourth gear, I'm thinking of like a stick shift, there are two different gears. And fourth gear doesn't, if you're driving in fourth gear, it doesn't mean first gear is a bad gear, right? Because when you're climbing a hill, you're going to want first gear. And when you're in first gear, fourth gear is no less valid, because fourth gear is typically like, cruising, driving fast, right? So you wouldn't be able to drive without maybe getting honked at a lot on the freeway in first gear. You need fourth gear. So that is a super important part of this, because when we start to assign values and validity to things, we start judging it. We don't dive deep. And that judgment is really the part of this we need to let go. And that judgment is going to keep you where you are if you don't let it go. So again, all the gears are valid, okay? The story that you've been telling yourself is valid. Know that as you take yourself forward, because you don't want to be telling your story. When you hit your intentional thought, you don't want to go, say, like in 3 weeks, go back and start to judge. Oh, I'm so glad I'm not that person anymore, right? That is not how you want to view yourself. In any moment, you are a valuable, created being at any one moment in time, okay? Because all of this, I know it's kind of like this more holistic view, but that holistic view really is going to affect the way you experience shifting gears and going from unintentional to intentional thoughts, because you can know a process, right? But if you can't actually execute it because there's some roadblocks, right? We need to know what those roadblocks are, right? I mean, we're constantly consuming new information on YouTube, on Google, TikTok, Pinterest, whatever it may be. But that knowledge, just because we have it doesn't mean the change occurs, right? Whatever we were looking to. So if you, I've been doing some real estate lately, just because I watch a video on Deeper Pockets, which is a real estate channel, doesn't mean that because I hear the knowledge, I all of a sudden know how to create great wealth and income from real estate, right? I have to be able to go through the process. And in that, I might come up with roadblocks. And I need to know what those roadblocks are to actually executing this, right? So judging yourself, thinking here or there is better than here, these are all roadblocks, okay? Because it's going to start to affect the way you view yourself, your overall worth, and who you are. Okay, so that was number 3, define and create safety. Now we're stepping into number 4. Choose your slogan. Okay, now we create your intentional thought. And to me, this is actually the easiest. It's the easiest part of it. You've done all the hard work. Now here's the easiest part to do, but then committing to doing it over and over and thinking the intentional thought is part of the challenge. But just choosing your slogan, creating your intentional thought itself is actually, if you've come up to this point, to me, the simplest part of it. Now, you can think of 2 components, and you can think either component or an and, both components, right? So number 1 is when you're creating your intentional thought, think of your best experience related to your intentional thought. Or unintentional thought, I'm sorry. So for instance, if you are a teacher and you have that student, so I actually taught middle school, so I had 6 periods, well, 5. I actually was actively teaching. One is a period of prep, but so I had 5 different sets of students each day, and inevitably there would be at least one in each class who at one time or another would feel like they're sabotaging my class, right? So take your best experience against your worst experience or the narrative you're telling yourself. So just as I had those annoying students, right? 2 things is those annoying students weren't annoying 100% of the time, right? I had good experiences with them. So you can take that experience of, like I said, if you're a teacher and you have that sabotaging student, is think of your best experience with them, because that's also a reality. You can experience the best experience with them. It's just, what are you focusing on? What thoughts are you choosing about them? Or it could be, in this example, the interaction with the student that does make you feel encouraged, or whatever feeling feels good in your body, and take those characteristics and start to look for them in the student who's annoying, because you will find them. And you will notice that the 2 are not so far apart. It just has to do with the way that you choose to think about each of these students. So that's what I mean by the 2 components when you're creating your slogan or your intentional thought can be based on this, your best experience. The other thing is depending on your intentional thought, because sometimes we're trying to strive for something above what we're used to. So in this regards, you can also use your best experience, but it's also the feeling of riding a roller coaster or going on an adventure. Because when you're trying to push yourself forward or above or to another level, you have to understand that there is going to be a sense of, sorry, my computer just, oh, I have put, oh, it just fell out. Sorry about that, guys. When you're writing that, when you're going to that next level, it's going to feel somewhat like, what is it going to be like? Because you haven't experienced it before. So there is this kind of sense of like, whoa, roller coaster, sense of adventure, right? Like it should expand you. So these are two components to think about. So you might do an either, or you could do an and, whichever is going to suit you to get you to where you want to feel or the experience you want. And what I say is now start to create the story that you want to tell about yourself. What is the intentional narrative you want to tell yourself about your experience? You're writing your own story. And so, but you do need a specific thought, right? I mean, you can take it to a greater experience, right? And that's how it's typically going to, for me at least, it starts off with this like, well, I kind of want to feel like I've contributed. I want to feel like I was bold. I want to feel that I raised my hand and offered like a new and innovative idea. I want to feel like I took the time to listen to somebody who no one else was listening to. Whatever the story you want, okay? So concocting that story. But just like the first step, number one, is getting it down to your slogan, right? So it initially might start off like something like a commercial, right? Maybe 30 to 60 seconds. Then I want you to start to condense that into something more like a TikTok, something much shorter. And then condense it even further. And I think, of Vines. Does anyone remember what Vines are? They were like, I think 7-second videos. So condense it down to a Vine, right? And what would that caption say as you watched that Vine, that 7-second video? What would that caption say? That is now your slogan. That is now your intentional thought. And when you read this caption, I want to make sure that this caption serves you and your nervous system. If it's not, if you can't step into it and really embrace it, and part of it feels very far away, you probably have to go back to step 2 or 3. There's some kind of judgment still attached to it. There's some kind of resistance because your body doesn't feel safe. Okay, so make sure that the slogan you have is something that your nervous system can experience, right? Not just thoughts in your head, not just a narrative like reading a paper, but an actual experience for your body. And one that also, not also, but included, I think is more the word, is you feel safe. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to not quite know what's on the other side. But you still need to feel safe. That doesn't mean without fear, but it is a sense of safety. Because the safer you feel, the easier it's going to be for your brain to shift those gears. And again, remember that this thought is not trying to erase your unintentional model. You're not trying to get rid of your unintentional model. You're just adding a gear. You're just adding a gear to by which you can drive the car, the vehicle, you around. And the reason I say this is when we try to negate a narrative, it is really hard to do. So number two, there's kind of this practical aspect of it's just hard to do. It's like so deeply rooted. You're going to spend so much time trying to negate this, this narrative that you're not going to be able to move on, right? And then number two, it comes down to a way that we look at our self-worth, right? So to negate that is to negate us and who we've been in the past. We never want to do that. So again, these are not like competing thoughts this way, right? They're just part of this whole system that is available to us. Our brain is going to choose one of those thoughts. And then there's our greater self, our more holistic self, that is then going to choose what we actually are going to focus on, right? Our brain, our primitive brain, our primal brain is going to offer us a thought really quickly. And initially, that unintentional model is going to come up first because your primitive brain speaks far faster than your higher brain, your prefrontal cortex. It's just quicker to the draw to offer you a thought because it has actually like less bandwidth. Its bag of tricks is very small. So it's going to be able to offer you something much, much faster. And then your holistic self comes in and gets to say, primitive brain, not today. We're going to take our intentional model and focus on that. And then some days you will go with your unintentional model, and that's perfectly okay. Remember that all of this is also overall progress to get to where you want. Never expect 100% perfection from the beginning. Great if you could do it, fantastic. But I really don't know anyone who can do that. Congratulations if it's you. So that is what I wanted to offer you is it's just not this process, right? Not just ticking off, did I play the wise game? Did I listen to my body? Define and create safety, just fill in the blanks, right? But what is your actual experience going through this, right? And it's not going to go perfectly the first, second, third, even the 100th time, right? Because as you go through this process, more and more roadblocks are going to come up. But when you remove those roadblocks, it makes the intentional road much more accessible, right? So right now it's easy to go to the unintentional. You don't have any roadblocks, or you don't have roadblocks there, right? Getting to the unintentional thought is going to have some roadblocks. And maybe as you've gone through this process, you have removed them, but more may come up, and that's okay. But you will get through those roadblocks, and that path, that's what I was looking for. That path is going to get easier and easier to follow. And you're going to create a deeper and deeper groove in your brain for that intentional thought. And also the unintentional thought, that groove is going to start to lose how deeply grooved it is, because I think of it kind of like driving, and you create a groove, right, through mud, and it gets hardened. But as people drive over that, right, it starts to kind of like you get erased. And so that's what's going to happen to your unintentional model. So you get to decide what groove do you want to create, kind of like grooves in a record. So yeah, those are your 4 steps. So identify the specific thought using the 3 whys game. Listen to the story your body is telling you, define and create safety, and then creating your unintentional thought, creating or choose your slogan. Remember, this is all a choice. It's not a have to, it's not a there's a right way. You get to choose your slogan. So thank you so much for writing this out with me, right? So the one kind of, if I had to define it in 2 sentences, if I was playing the why game myself, don't judge your unintentional model, just shift. Choose the gear you want to cruise around in. So those, after playing the why game myself, that's what I came up with to define this process. And what I wanted to do is drop my information. Oh, how did I expand myself? And there is how you can connect with me. So if you had any questions about this or any comments, you're free to contact me there. I'd love to hear from you, your feedback, your experience going through that process. And if you are interested in coaching with me, I run the Courageous Fear program. And yeah, I'd love to tell you about it. I'd love to listen to your story and possibly partner together. And if you loved this webinar, I'm going to be doing one next month, very tightly related to this. So if you feel like, okay, I heard this, either I want to go somewhere else, not somewhere else, I want to stay around this area, I kind of want to explore this area of creating safety, getting into my emotions. I'm going to be doing one on processing emotions next month. So I would love for you to join me there. And I just wanted to remind you guys again that this webinar comes to you through Life Coach University, the Pay It Forward talks. And we ask that you pay it forward to someone else in whatever way suits you. But like I mentioned earlier, I would love if some of you would pay it forward by inviting a friend and attending the Life Coach University conference on February 15th, hosted, and the keynote speaker will be Anna Wallner. And remember, guys, we get her in English. We don't have to listen in Swedish and get subtitles. She's actually going to be conducting this in English. So we get some of her genius without the subtitles. And you're also going to be benefiting from the experience and expertise of Kelly Turner, Chris Wales, Tanya Hunt, and Norma Fraun, which are all Life Coach University coaches. They're awesome. You can go to lifecoachuniversity.com and check out all the events coming up, including theirs. And then for any experiences that you guys have, we would love to hear about them. And you can email hello@lifecoachuniversity.com and share your experience with us. We'd love to know. Yeah, that does sound amazing. And there's more amazingness from Life Coach University. I'm always so pleasantly surprised by all the ideas that come through with these amazing panel of coaches that we have. So check back often. There's always something super juicy and super fun and amazing on our website. And so I, Lani Kim, am a life coach, and I'm going to be joining the Life Coach University Conference on Tuesday, February 15th. And I hope you'll join me as well as all the other amazing coaches. All right. So have a fantastic weekend. Take care.